Husband prefers endless screen time to spending quality moments with me, leaving me to question if our marriage is just over. My husband, 27 male, and I, 28F, got married 9 months ago, and have been together for 4 years. My husband is the type of person that stays to himself unless it's absolutely necessary or completely unavoidable. He's quiet, and doesn't really talk to anyone unless he really enjoys their company. He's a gamer, and prefers to spend his free time alone playing video games. We joke that he's a hermit, because he hates leaving the house. If we do have to go anywhere, he gets really anxious after about an hour or two in public before he's begging me to go home. On the other hand, I love talking to people I care about and seeing them often. I like for my husband to be nearby or in the same room whenever possible, even if we're doing different things. I take every chance I have to get out of the house, but I don't really enjoy going places and doing things by myself. I try to find those little opportunities for connection, but it's been a struggle. Now the problem, 3 nights ago, we got into an argument that ended with me sobbing, begging him for more attention and affection, and my husband telling me, "I ask about your day and eat dinner with you sometimes. You should be grateful for that, what more do you want?" I'm not even sure how the argument started that night, but it wasn't the first time we've had this fight, and it's gotten progressively worse since the wedding. Whether it's his phone or computer, my husband is always glued to a screen, and he doesn't even bother to look up at me when I try to talk to him. It has gotten to the point where he will come home from work and sit outside in 95+ degree heat for hours to play on his phone without being disturbed. He'll only come inside for food or to use the bathroom until it's time for bed, and he'll do this all without ever saying a word to me. I've told him I was lonely, and that I missed his company. I've asked if he lost interest in spending time with me. In the past, we tried to find solutions. Sometimes we'd follow through, and sometimes we didn't. Lately his response is always, "I'm a boring person, and I'm just really tired from the heat, it's summertime, we live in the southern U.S. and he works construction." But his comment about being grateful is a new low for us, and while emotionally I'm still starving for his attention, I don't know how to move past this. I know my husband idolizes his parents' marriage, separate in content. They spend most their time apart, and only really come together for meals and sleeping, and the occasional check-in or serious conversation here and there. While I adore my in-laws and can clearly see how in love they are, I do not want my own marriage to be like theirs at all, and my husband knows this. So why should I be grateful for the bare minimum, if I can even call it that? What the fuck does that even mean, anyway? Does he think I don't deserve more? Am I not worth the effort to him? I'm angry. I'm hurt. I am so fucking sad. I don't want to wear my wedding ring. I don't want to share a bed with him. I'm not even interested in talking to him anymore. I've come to the realization that I don't want to be with someone who makes loving me feel like a chore. My best friend thinks I should try talking to him again, tell him how I feel and try to work it out. I don't think it will get us anywhere, as there's no point in having the same conversation and hope that it will suddenly change things. We've tried couples therapy before getting married. It did help us through some problems we were having, shout out to the Gottman method, but my husband complained about it a lot. He didn't see the point of the activities we did each session and straight up refused to do the homework assigned to us. I'd suggest trying therapy again if I thought it would help, but I don't see any outcome that makes me feel like he's paying me more attention without making my husband miserable. Divorce feels like a massive jump, and it would be super messy. Both of our names are on the deed to the house, all of our money is in one shared bank account, and his mom just co-signed for a car with me and added it to her insurance policy to help us save money. Our state requires a minimum 6-month separation period before filing. My husband has made it clear that he's 100% against divorce being the solution to our problems, so I don't think he would let it be a peaceful or easy separation. Even now, as I type this, my husband is outside, watching a movie on his phone. He hasn't made a single attempt to talk to me today, except to ask if I paid a medical bill. I've been crying ever since he told me to be grateful. I feel trapped in a failed marriage. It's like the last 4 years were all for nothing, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do in this situation. I'm sorry, but this is not going to work out. You two have different needs and expectations. While that can be improved by counseling, it sounds like the core difference are really about who you are as people. The only reason my parents are still together is because their religion does not allow for divorce, and their status within their church community is too important to them to risk ruining their image. My parents resent each other in silence. I want nothing like my parents' marriage. We share a lot of the same interest. Same taste in music, same love for horror movies. I actually enjoy video games too, I just don't commit nearly as much time to them as he does. And he wasn't always like this. In the beginning, he'd go outside for a smoke, maybe doom scroll TikTok for 15 to 20 minutes, then come back inside and hang out. We'd cook together, talk about our day, maybe even watch an episode of a show or the first bit of a movie together. Sometimes I would even sit outside with him. I don't know what happened, but that all started to slowly see Hanja after we bought our house last year. When he does actually give a shit, he's an incredibly kind and caring person. I always had a smile on my face around him up until this week. Update 1. My husband was not always like this. I knew he was an introvert because we were friends for 2 years before we started dating. I fell in love with all his little personality quirks, and we've had long discussions about both of our expectations long before the idea of marriage was ever on the table. I never wanted to fix him, nor did I ever expect him to change himself for me. However, I don't expect the internet to understand the intricacies of a relationship between two individuals based off one post. In the beginning of our relationship, I gave him his space when he needed it, but he would always return the affection that I needed from him. This avoidant behavior began right before we got married, more on this later. My husband is not autistic. He was tested twice as a child, as I found out from my mill. He's just very antisocial. Together, we have a very small and close-knit group of friends that he really enjoys being around. Outside of those chosen few, he doesn't like people. However, we both have untreated yet high-functioning ADHD. It was my husband's idea to do couples therapy before getting married. At the time, there was nothing wrong in our relationship. Simply put, we both saw the benefits that premarital counseling could have for us in the long run. How to effectively communicate emotions, how to properly resolve arguments, sharing household responsibilities, and keeping our marriage interesting. May 10, 1950, years down the road.
My husband complained because most of the activities we did were at least 20 years old and felt outdated, i.e., taking messages from the landline voicemail.
Who the fuck still uses a landline? That being said, we still learned some great tools that we have been able to implement in our marriage, and they work really well for us, so we stopped therapy once we felt we no longer needed a mediator. Update 2. Sunday night, I decided I was going to leave. I knew I needed some genuine time and space away from my husband to get my head straight and figure out if a divorce was really what I wanted in this situation. So I called my parents and arranged for them to keep my dog for a couple of weeks. Yesterday morning my best friend told me she was getting a guest room ready for me, and I started packing up my things. My husband came home from work a little early and saw all my stuff by the front door. He started crying, and asked between sobs if I was leaving. All I did was nod my head, and continued packing. What happened next feels like a blur. It's important to note here that a storm had knocked our power out earlier that morning and it had not come back on at this point, so the house wasn't as cool as usual. My husband's crying became faster, and I heard him mumble something about a headache. He dropped his work stuff and stumbled to a bathroom, then started vomiting. Curiosity got the best of me, and when I peeked in to check on him, I knew something was wrong. His breathing had become shallow and rapid, and he was sweating more now than when he had walked in. He looked pale, and was slurring his words a little. When I put my hand on his neck to see if he was okay, his skin was clammy and burning up. I realized in this moment that there was a strong chance he was having a heat stroke. I helped my husband out of his work clothes and into a cool shower, then went find him some loose-fitting clothes and ice packs. Once he was out of the shower and dressed, I drove him straight to the small emergency room down the street. After an initial assessment, it was determined that my husband was probably not having a heat stroke, but severe heat exhaustion. His body temperature started coming down after they put one of those air-filled cooling blankets over him, but he was still very weak and dehydrated. The doctor decided to keep him for observation while doing a few rounds of 4 fluids, and we were able to come home in the middle of the night after a bunch of different tests were done to make sure there was no damage to my husband's organs. While we waited, we had a lot of time to talk without any distractions. There was a lot of crying from both of us, but we finally got to the bottom of things. I won't bore you all with the details, but 2023 was not a good year for me. It started when my husband's truck flipped after getting hit by a drunk driver. We were wearing our seatbelts, and managed to walk away with only some aches and bruises, but I developed PTSD and began having panic attacks while driving. I was under a ton of stress from planning our wedding, which caused high blood pressure and horrible migraines. At the same time, I was experiencing massive burnout from working in healthcare the last 4 years and during the COVID pandemic. I was diagnosed with manic bipolar disorder, and was coping with an infertility diagnosis all within 6 months. My mental health was tanking, and I honestly just needed a little extra emotional support. This is around the time the arguments for more attention began. My husband and I eventually sat down to figure out a solution to my worsening mental state, and we both agreed that I could benefit from taking some extended time away from work, seeing as my symptoms were made worse by stress. My husband was happy to let me play housewife for as long as I needed while he provided for us, but I got bored easily staying home all day. I made the decision to quit my job last Christmas, and took a higher paying, part-time job after the start of the new year. Even though my mental health was getting better, the arguments over attention started to get worse. My husband started to withdraw a bit, and what started as give me 15 minutes to finish this game, then we can watch a movie or go grab food, turned into, go ask a friend to hang out or pick up some extra shifts at work if you don't want to stay home. I did those things, and even started reading more, and finally got around to decorating our house. It was clear he wanted his space, so I kept busy. I tried to find things to do together that he might enjoy, so we've planned 4 vacations over the next year for us to look forward to, our first trip being just 2 months away. I still felt lonely and continued to ask for affection, but it only made him withdraw more, and as summer started, his reason was being too tired from the heat. Now we've had a lot going on in our lives over the last month or so. I made the decision to start working full-time again, and I was a little nervous about it, which probably prompted me to bring up the need for more attention. My original post was less about his behavior as a whole, and more specific to his comment about being grateful. This comment was completely out of character for my husband and caught me off guard. In the moment, my feelings were hurt, and I truly believed he meant what he said, that I should be grateful for bare minimum treatment. It made me question our entire relationship, and whether or not this marriage would work if that's how he truly felt. Needless to say, the heat really was messing with his head. When I asked my husband why he thinks I should be grateful for how he's been treating me in our marriage, he doesn't remember saying that or even having the argument in the first place. The entire weekend, he knew I was upset with him, but he couldn't figure out why, so he kept his distance until he felt like I had calmed down enough to talk about it. Coming home and seeing me ready to leave was his tipping point. Turns out, my husband has been severely depressed since switching crews at work. His last superintendent dropped the ball on his promotion before sending him to work overnights on a chemical refinery turnaround. When that job finished, my husband got placed with a superintendent that openly does not like him, and has a known, documented, history of treating my husband badly due to the color of his skin, or lack thereof. Over the last few weeks, this superintendent has been giving my husband a really hard time, and is now refusing to sign the company endorsement paperwork for him to begin operator school. My husband has been keeping this all balled up inside, letting it eat away at him, because he was too worried the stress of the situation would flare up my symptoms and trigger a manic episode. That's why he had been isolating himself so much, and paired with the heat, he had completely checked out mentally because he was trying to protect me. I'm sorry to disappoint so many of you, but I love my husband, and have decided to stick by his side as we work through this together. My husband has agreed to set timers in order to limit his screen time. We are going to try therapy again, both together and individually, to work on communicating better and dealing with stress. Right now he is still resting from the heat exhaustion, and hopefully he'll be better by this weekend. Now on to second story. In-laws insist on calling me Robbie's best friend instead of wife, leaving me baffled and wondering if it's some form of hidden rejection. My husband Robbie, 26 male, and I, 26F, got married earlier this year. It was a beautiful day and I felt so much love and support from both sides of our family. 2 months after our wedding day, we celebrated my birthday at my in-laws' house. It was nothing major, just a dinner and a night together with me, my husband, his mom, 50SF, dad, 50SM, and sister 22F. That is the first night I noticed them referring to me as Robbie's best friend. After my birthday dinner, we were all sitting together in the living room, just chatting and having some drinks. That's when my Sil got a phone call from a good friend of hers. When she answered the phone and her friend asked what she was doing, she replied that it was her brother's best friend's birthday. I had never heard anyone refer to me as Robbie's best friend. I am his wife, and before that we were engaged for over 2 years. Hearing my Sil refer to me like that confused me greatly. I always refer to her as my Sil, and I would expect her to do the same. Or maybe even as Robbie's wife, but certainly not best friend. After my Sil hung up her phone, I asked her why she referred to me the way she did. She did not seem at all abashed. She just said, well, you are best friends. And that's what mom and dad call you, referring to Mill and Phil. My Sil and I are by no means very close, but we are nice to each other and have never had any fights. We just don't hang out outside of family functions because our personalities are pretty different. She's never made it seem like she was annoyed or mad at me. I decided to let it go that night, even though it weirded me out. But then it all happened again a few days ago, which is why I'm writing this post. My Mill and I both work in the same industry doing similar jobs, but at different companies in the area. Sometimes our companies collaborate when we have clients who switch over. This week we had that happen, and I had to pay a visit to my Mill's office to help a client transition. My Mill was in the office, so I stopped by to say hello. While I was there she introduced me to her colleague, and once again I was perplexed by how she did it. She said, "This is my son's best friend." As I was shaking hands with the colleague, I paused and awkwardly said I'm his wife. The colleague looked confused but my Mill continued to smile and didn't address it. Once we were alone I asked my Mill why she referred to me like that. Just like my Sil, she didn't seem to act like it was weird at all, and said the same thing, "Well, you are best friends." The only thing that I can think to explain this is that in my vows to Robbie I promised to continue being his best friend. Nobody did like this was odd or special, and I feel like it's a pretty common thing to put in vows. So I'm not sure why Robbie's family seems to have clung to it, unless it has nothing to do with everything. I've spoken to Robbie about this too, and he is also perplexed by it. He asked his parents privately about it and they gave him the same answer they've been giving me. It all just feels like some sort of bullying behavior to me, but I've never felt a sense of this from them before. Are they calling me his best friend because they don't like the fact I'm his wife? Or is it some inside joke they've been in on without me? I'm not sure what to do or make of it, especially because the in-laws are acting like it's not an issue when I bring it up. Yes, I am Robbie's best friend, but I'm also his life partner, and their dill/sil. I don't know what to do. Any input or advice would be welcome. Update 1. I'm sorry to hear that this is not exactly a unique experience. Unfortunately for my relationship with Robbie's family, shit has hit the fan. Yesterday afternoon, Robbie and I were invited over to his parents' house for dinner. I have a big project due this week at work, so I needed to stay home and wrap it up. I told Robbie to go catch up with his family while I order a pizza. Apparently, this is when Robbie decided he was going to set things straight and figure out why his mom and sister keep referring to me as his best friend. Please keep in mind that I'm telling this story based on the details that my husband has given me. Robbie had a normal dinner with his folks, but they were all drinking a bit more than usual. Robbie decided to bring over some scotch that one of his groomsmen gave him for a wedding gift, so him and his dad were especially loose. Robbie and his dad tend to have guy time together after dinners where they hang out in his dad's garage and talk about car stuff and projects at home/work. This is where Robbie confronted his dad about the whole situation. From what I can tell, it took some coaxing to get this information out of Phil, but eventually he admitted to Robbie that my Mill and Sil and him were all in on some sort of bet as to how long mine and Robbie's marriage was going to last. Phil bet that we would stay together, whereas Mill bet less than 1 year, and Sil bet less than 6 months. Apparently there was a cash prize involved. I don't really want to know how much it was. Phil admitted that he believes the whole best friend moniker was a way to get under my skin and cause doubts about my relationship with Robbie and his family. They think that if they acted like it was a non-issue for long enough, that it would drive me crazy and start making me angry at Robbie for not intervening. Robbie then says he stormed into the house to confront his mom about this all. It ended in a screaming match between Robbie, Mill, and Phil. Robbie eventually stormed out and walked to a nearby gas station, and from there he called me for a ride since he couldn't drive. This morning, when I drove Robbie back to get his car, we had a horribly awkward confrontation with his parents. Mill is apparently pissed at Phil for betraying the secret, and they were fighting about it all night. Phil will be staying with us in our extra bedroom for a couple days, or until they can calm down and talk to each other again. Robbie is now set on going no contact with his mom and sister. He is angry with his father but is more willing to forgive him. Personally, I would prefer if we saw a family therapist before doing this, but we are still ironing out the details. Hopefully we can get through this with both marriages intact.